Well, Chris, I'd love to jump into your background. I'm really excited to be speaking with you today. You were the first ever immigration lawyer I ever met back when me and my wife met in 2014, and we were exploring what it meant to for me as a U.S. citizen to get married to a foreign national. And I remember we called you. My dad said, "Oh, I know an immigration attorney. He's a really great guy." I think you guys met at law school, right?
I've known him for a lot of years. It was a little after law school, but yeah, I've known him many
Okay.
years.
So decades at this point. He says, I know an immigration attorney who's one of the best attorneys I know. And yeah, connect with him. And I called you and I said, hey, my wife, we're we're uh I don't know if we were married yet or we had um been talking about getting married, but I was like, I have a wife on an F1 student visa. Can we travel? And you were like, you really shouldn't travel before you do the adjustment of status process. And I was like, but Attorney Keen, I got accepted into this exchange program in Europe. What do I do? And you were like, well, I don't know. We ended up going. Luckily, she didn't get sent to secondary inspection, and we did the green card process after that. But we've known each other for years at this point, and I really respect and admire you, and love to just jump into a little bit more of your background. Why did you get involved in immigration in the first place? And what does your practice look like today?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and it's been good knowing you for all these years. And I remember you were one of my clients who pushed back a little bit. And our job as attorneys is to give advice, and we've seen all the worst case scenarios. And sometimes the worst case doesn't happen, but when it sure does happen, then boy, there's some consequences. But I'm,
Uh,
but we're glad it worked out for you guys. So,
yeah.
immigration law. How did I get started? Well, I learned Spanish a little bit in school, and then I did a 2-year mission, and I spoke Spanish on that mission and worked with a lot of immigrants who spoke Spanish. And I got to know the people, and you kind of just develop a desire to help them out, a desire to be interested in what they're going through. And so that kind of opened my eyes up to the possibility of immigration law. And I took a immigration law course in law school. I volunteered, and I kind of loved it. I just loved it. And so from the get-go, my first case was an immigration case, and immigration law began to take a bigger and bigger part of my practice. There's just something that, you know, that you really can you get a big benefit from helping people and seeing them achieve their goal. And I have a little, our mission of my law firm, and that is to help immigrants live and work legally in the United States with their families. That's our mission, and we help immigrants go through the legal process the correct way, and that is so satisfying. I mean, uh, I realize other practice areas are just as satisfying. For me, I don't think they would be, but for other attorneys, I'm sure they are. But having somebody come and pick up their green card from the office and be so overjoyed with tears. Um, it's just a great experience. And I also think that these immigrants are the beginning of their family lines here in the United States, and they will be looked at by their descendants as this is the immigrant. They went through a lot. It was a tough process. It was stressful. It was scary, and they made it. And I love to be a part of that. And I I just think it's important to help as many immigrants through that bureaucratic process as possible.
And it's amazing that you, over the course of your career, you've helped thousands and thousands of people. And I say this often that immigration is like up there with the most important things you do in your entire life. You are literally picking a place where you want to reside long term. It's up there with picking a partner, with I'd say it's even more critical than buying a house. How many times do you buy a house over the course of your life? Maybe one time, but many people maybe buy two or three houses. Um, you immigrate to a country generally one time. And so you are their advocate throughout one of the most critical things that they will do in their entire life, one of the most important things. Tell me about like a early success story. How long have you been practicing, and what's a story that early on you were like, wow, this is impactful, amazing work, and I want to spend my life doing more of this.
Well, this year is I'm going into my 23rd year of doing immigration law. And oh boy, I've seen so many changes, so many administrations. I kind of categorize my practice through the presidents I practice through because the
Yeah,
executive branch has a lot of impact on immigration. They set policy, and while they don't change the immigration statutes with a change in the presidency, they definitely affect enforcement and priorities. And my practice changes with every presidency, every single one since George W. Bush, who was president when I first started practicing, all the way to Donald Trump today. The good news is the statutes stay the same. And the tough news is how you get there might change, you know, and how difficult will the process be. One of my early cases that just made me really happy. And by the way, these cases stretch over years. And so this was 30 years ago when I helped this fellow. His name's Dagoberto, but he was in some trouble with immigration because he hadn't completed his processes yet, and he was locked up. And I had just gotten onto the case, and they went ahead and deported him while we had an appeal pending. We filed a notice of appeal right away uh, from his process he had applied for, and they just went ahead and deported him. But we went ahead and fought that, and actually we had to go up to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and they found in our favor, and he was um, actually um, ICE was ordered to bring him back. So I had to meet with ICE, and he was deported to Mexico. And this process took several years, and I'd have to call him. And back then, this was before cell phones um, were as prolific. And I'd have to call him at a store that was close to his family farm, and I'd hear chickens in the background, and I'd have to arrange a time to talk to him. And I remember the time when I told him, Dagoberto, we won. You're coming back. And I just heard a big pause and I heard a chicken squawk or two. And he just said, thank you.
wow, that's amazing.
And, but we got him back and we got him through the process. And it was about a year and a half ago where he ultimately became a U.S. citizen. He was a resident for many years and then he ultimately became a U.S. citizen. And that was so rewarding to see him complete that process, to be able to be here with his family, his children, grandkids. But those little victories really motivate me as an attorney to keep going. And you got to hang on to those because when you're doing immigration law, you're against the US government. Your clients often uh, require a lot of discretion and um, um, a lot of positive decision making that they're depending on the government to do, and sometimes they're not going to get it. Sometimes they're going to get denied. So you got to hang on to those good victories. But yeah, it's every little victory is a victory for a person, for a family, and that's just kind of what keeps me going.
Something I really admire about you is that you do full service immigration. You're not intimidated by litigation, you're not intimidated by criminal work, and you have litigated all the way up to the US Supreme Court. Tell us a little bit more about that and what that experience was like.
Yeah, that's correct. But pretty early on in my career, even before Dagoberto's case, I had a case that involved some complex immigration issues. In 1997, the immigration law really changed with IRA. And throughout the next several years, those issues were being litigated through the courts to kind of figure out what does this law mean. And my client was a 245I protected adjustment of status applicant, which just meant he had a really old petition. And even though he did not enter with a visa, he paid the fine and went to go adjust his status. But then ICE, of course, picked him up at the interview and kept him in detention. And we litigated this all the way to the Supreme Court. And this individual actually had a prior deportation. And so we were arguing that the reinstatement provision of, for the deportation, that should be trumped by his eligibility to adjust status. And there was a little bit of a circuit split there. And so the Supreme Court took the case, and I had so much help on that. That's such a tough thing to do for a solo attorney. And I had the American Immigration Lawyers Association stepped in. I think now that division's called the American Immigration Council. And I had other colleagues step in to help with that case. And I got to go to the Supreme Court when they had oral arguments. And there's actually an attorney from a big law firm in DC that did the oral arguments. I was sitting with him at the council table. And well, you're so close to those justices. You don't realize how small that courtroom is unless you've really been in it. But you have to wear a coat with tails, and I did not have that
I
type of.
I didn't know that. Where do you even buy a coat with tails?
I had no idea, and I didn't bring one. So they had some in the basement, and some guy who seemed to come more like a butler took me down there and got me a coat that had the right size tails, so I could
Wow.
get the okay, appearing before the justices. And back then, there were no cameras in the courtroom that were allowed to take pictures or video. There's audio recordings, but it was funny to see the justices throughout all the other arguments. They would be like this, half asleep, rocking back and forth, because they weren't posing for a TV shot or anything.
Yeah.
And it was intimidating, and it was, um, I mean, we had something to fight for. We were fighting for Bert Fernandez is his name, and we were fighting for his wife Rita and his little boy Anthony at the time. And that was the motivation to get down there. And of course, they didn't have the funds to pay a lot, for that type of litigation. And so, I had an investment in buying my own plane ticket over there and fighting this case. And it was a great experience to go through the briefs, the reply briefs, and to go to the oral arguments. And unfortunately, that case did not turn out our way. The court sided with the government on that case in an 8-1 decision. And that case was Fernandez Vargas versus Ashcroft. But it was a good experience, and I think it's worth the fight. And sometimes you're not going to win, but we've had other good victories at the 10th Circuit, at the Board of Immigration Appeals. But I think real people um, are at the root of every case, and it affects real families.
Tell us about one of those victories at the 10th Circuit.
Yeah, that was actually Dagoberto's case that I told you about, and that was great. That was a great case. There was a circuit split on the definition of some verbiage in the statutes as far as whether Dagoberto had a right to file a motion to reopen when he was not in the States, because they took him while we had that appeal pending and they deported him. And up till then, the Board of Immigration Appeals said, well, if the person's not in the United States, then the case is dismissed. And so if the government had a case they might lose, if they deported the individual, then that case would just be dismissed. And we made arguments at the 10th Circuit that was ultra virus to the statute, and that the statute said they get one motion to reopen. And so they get one motion, and it doesn't matter if they're in the US or out of the US. And so the court fully considered our motion and sided with us. And that basically changed the law in the 10th Circuit. So that was a positive outcome there. And Dagoberto is now a US citizen. So that's kind of the flip side of the other case where we actually,
That's amazing.
yeah.
That's so incredible. You are always going all in to fight for your clients, and these stories illustrate that you uh, will not stop until you've exhausted every single channel and option that there is. And one of the things that, as an immigration lawyer, we have to consider is like it's all about efficiency and how can you take on more work and fight for more people. You're obviously not a stranger to the uncertainties and roadblocks that the government throws at you, especially around government processing. And I'm wondering if you were to, put some of these government delays aside, what are some of the biggest barriers that you're seeing within our industry with law firms, nonprofits, and the individual foreign nationals that slow down a case from start to finish?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's several, but I think one of the biggest ones in an immigration firm, and maybe in other firms that are pretty paperwork driven, is document collection. At the outset of a case, we onboard the clients, we give them a list of documents that we're going to need. They've already given us some, probably. We might have some in our file for them, but there's a list of stuff that they're going to have to go out and get for us. And it might be information, it may be birth certificates, marriage certificates, but getting a timely response by the clients to get that document collection complete so we can present their case and actually do the document preparation. It's a roadblock. It's a bottleneck, and it's the perpetual struggle, I think, of most immigration law firms. It's tough to be able to send off a case if you don't have the relevant documents, and there's not a whole lot we can do to go get some of those things or some of the information. Some of them we actually can get, but some of them we just have to rely on the clients to get to us. And the clients are living their lives. They're working, they're in school, they have families, they have kids. And at the beginning of a case, they're so excited and they're ready to go. Well, they've paid a fee and they've signed a contract and they're ready to go get their immigration process completed. But um, seeing a list of documents that they need might be a little overwhelming to them. And that's just been something that's slowed us down. And we have different categories of cases in our pipeline. And and for us, document collection is one of the stages. And we have to watch that, or else some cases will stall out. They won't proceed. And
I remember, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I remember at Simple Citizen, we worked with folks from all over the world. And I remember some of these countries, it was pretty difficult to get the right birth certificate or divorce decree or marriage certificate. And, we'd always help them as they're going through the reciprocity schedule from the Department of State. And I remember there were certain countries where it was nearly impossible to get the right document while you were in the US. And so we saw certain instances where people even had to travel back to their home countries just to get the right document, or they had to hire some service where you basically, it's like almost like you get a right of attorney type thing, and you they can go on your behalf. And it was a big challenge, and I saw that there were folks that just ended up in this perpetual delay because of documents.
Yeah, that's true. And that's true in a lot of cases. And so we've had to really put our heads together and come up with some systems to minimize that. But that's always an area that I think can be improved upon. We've done quite a few things. Like I mentioned before, we monitor these stages of a case, and onboarding is a stage. Then document collection is a stage. And once that's complete, the production of the documents is another stage. But we closely monitor how long cases have been in that stage and have some milestone markers that, hey, if they have not completed their document delivery to us by a certain time, something's going on. And it could be like what you state that it's really hard to get one document. And my philosophy in the law has been most problems have a solution. You can fix almost any problem. It may not be the way you exactly want it to be fixed, but there's a solution. So sometimes we have to be creative and get a solution, whether it be hiring somebody else to go get that document or arranging for the client to be able to go get that document. And sometimes we have to submit a packet that it might be missing a document, not a crucial document, but a document that we'd like to present. And we may have to use the time frame between the time that we file the case and that it's adjudicated to be able to get that document and then submit it. But encouraging the clients to go out and get those documents is imperative at the outset while they're still excited, while they're really motivated. And
So
yeah,
you said that you break up your clients into these different stages and you track their progress. What type of systems do you have in place to make sure that you can, intervene if you're seeing that someone has a significant delay? Are you using software? Like, what does that look like for your practice?
yeah, we have a practice management software. I would hope every law firm has some type of practice management software or are tracking it at least on spreadsheets of some sort. But we happen to use Clio. I've used them for about 13 years, believe it or not. In 2012, we signed with them, and they've changed so much. And there's a lot of things I like about them, and there's some things that I wish were different. But Clio has a system to enable us to create stages for different matters. And we've built that right into Clio. And that's one way that we can see how long has a matter sat in a certain stage. Is there a problem with that? And that's not all, though. I mean, you can't just plug in a stage and say it's a stage two. We also look at cases every month on an audit. We audit the cases every month and we check the progress and make sure that things are moving. And we try to identify the particular bottlenecks in a specific case so we can address those and keep the case moving. So the monthly audits and the stages that are built into the software are really helpful. And every matter has to be assigned to somebody. Now, our firm, it's assigned to one of the attorneys. I have another associate that works with me, and it's also assigned to a paralegal. And we have a structure in place so that the paralegals can look at all the cases they're assigned for, and they're responsible for doing the paralegal audit. The attorneys are responsible for all their cases, and so they also have to make sure their cases are proceeding properly as well. But we can just take a glance in Clio and see all of our immigration cases and look at their stages and quickly identify, hey, this case isn't moving. What's going on with that? And the monthly audits also help us to make sure nothing falls through the cracks.
That's a great segue. You were obviously an early adopter of Clio, and I know you've implemented technology into other aspects of your firm. What's one outdated case management or client communication habit that should have died out a long time ago, but it's still around and is haunting firms today?
Oh yeah, we've tried several different pieces of technology, and one client communication habit that I think needs to die is to relying solely on the telephone to reach out
Yes.
and talk to your clients.
Uh-huh.
Those days are just over. And
Yeah.
um, before you could write to your clients in a letter that went snail mail to their home, or you could call them on the phone. But we have so many other options now, and clients are demanding that we use them. And that's sometimes hard to handle because now, if you're texting your clients, you've got to make sure that you've got those um, organized and that you're monitoring them and that they're saved in your client matter and your client portal. Most practice management systems have a dedicated secure client portal, and we use the client portal heavily. But you're always going to have some clients that don't want to use that. But if you're just relying on the phone, I think those days have passed for being efficient and effective because clients might be at work, but they'll see a text. They're going to respond to that text eventually when they can. And you got to be ready to respond as well back. And sometimes they may contact you on social media or through your website. And so there's a lot of different areas that have to be monitored now because clients want that ease of communicating. And so, yeah, I think that you have to adapt to how your clients are communicating. And it's not just by a verbal phone call anymore.
Yeah, I've heard stories of attorneys who don't adapt, and they end up getting left behind. The attorneys that never moved forward to email. There's obviously an entire demographic of clients that didn't end up working with them. It's the same today. We're seeing um, a lot of attorneys are finding clients on TikTok, on Instagram, on other social medias, and they just continue to maintain the relationship directly in those platforms. Same with SMS and other forms of communication. You're so right. In the last decade, we've seen a lot of legal tech companies that have they've promised to streamline case workflows for law firms, and sometimes we see that they actually just mean more work, both for the clients and for the legal teams at these law firms. In your career, what's one solution that stuck, and what's another that had a lot of promise but didn't actually end up working out?
Yeah, great questions. Um, One that stuck, I already mentioned we use Clio, and Clio has changed so much over the years. I'm glad I connected with them 12, 13 years ago, and that has been a foundation for my firm as far as keeping files organized. Is Clio the only way? No, there's lots of other ways. There's pros and cons to everything, but keeping my files managed, keeping my tasks managed, my calendaring, my accounting, all in one place, that is just crucial. And my practice management system is just so important to making sure that we can help a lot of clients. And there is a flop that I was just thinking about, um, and it's a document automation software, and it's called LawYaw. I don't think it exists anymore,
Yeah.
but
You're like, I can say the name. It's no longer around.
yeah, maybe it got acquired. I'm not sure, but we actually had a firm retreat, and one of our big announcements was we're going to start using LawYaw. It will change the way we do fee agreements, pleadings. It will be so easy. And we've used document automation in the past, but this was supposed to be more robust. And we started implementing it, and it was just so difficult to use. I mean, I'm not a programmer by any means, but I've seen a lot of tech, and I jumped around in that and tried to get it to work, and I couldn't quite get it to do what I wanted it to do and what I felt like they told me it would do. And I had some team members here working with it, and they would build you some templates if you paid them, and but nothing really worked, and it wasn't workable for us. And so we had this big introduction. We were so excited about it, but then it basically fizzled because it wasn't easy to to use. It wasn't easy to implement, and no matter how much time we spent on it, we just didn't get out of it what we had anticipated. So that was a flop for us. And I know there's a bunch of options out there, but we're practicing attorneys. We just want to grab something, make sure it's super intuitive, and that it just works. And sometimes that's hard to find.
You're right about that. Thinking about case flow efficiencies, clients are, at least what I've seen, they are focused on often three things: price, timeline, and accuracy, right? And oftentimes accuracy is number one. It's like that's why they work with law firms. They they are looking for some type of guarantee, some type of assurance that they're going to get an approval. um, and then I think you know price, convenience, those sort of are secondary, but it is where many law firms are differentiating. And I think sometimes technology helps to improve all three of those things, and increase your case flow efficiency, reduce bottlenecks so you can take on more work. but sometimes it is that there's just been oversights that the accuracy piece isn't there, and that some minor mistake or some minor thing led into a full-on disaster. I think we saw this a lot more in the first Trump administration. Do you have a story of like a a moment where there was some minor bottleneck like this that almost derailed a case and like really derailed the firm in terms of efficiency, where you're able to step in and fix it?
Yeah. Well, I have a story or two or three. Uh, One of them is um, where a client delayed taking some action, and this was under the first Trump administration. Trump 1.0 is, I think, what we can call it. And we kept reaching out to the client and saying, "Hey, you need to do this process. You need to renew this application." And he said, "I don't have to do it right now. I'll do it later." Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'll do it later. And we just kept telling him that you better take advantage of this. And I tell this to my clients a lot. And I told him the story too, that, hey, the apple is ripe on the tree. Grab it, take a bite, enjoy the apple because it's ripe now. If you wait, it might fall to the ground. Worms will start to eat it and things will go south. But the client just delayed taking action. And the process he was trying to renew, DACA, it was actually um, stopped by the courts, and you had to file your renewal within 1 year, or else you could not file another application. And so he was without DACA protection when he was completely eligible for it for his delays.
Oh, that's so tragic.
It is tragic. And now he's just litigating the case on a different basis, and it's taken so many extra unnecessary years and dollars that were unnecessary had he kind of listened to us. And so, um, that's one area where there's some changes in the law, unpredictable administration with immigration, and you have to take quick action. You really do.
Hmm.
And you have to work with your clients. And I don't know. I see that. I don't know what more I could have done to convince him to file sooner, but that did cause some problems in his case. And he's still here fighting, but it could have been a lot better had he, followed our advice.
Yeah, it's really tragic. I see that with my dad, especially on the criminal law side, where you say, hey, like maybe you should do X, Y, Z, and the client um, y- has maybe their own interpretation or their own approach, or like they're just distracted by other things in life and whatever else, and ends up with hard long-term consequences. And it's and ultimately it ends up it's hard for you and your practice and your firm because um, you spend all this time and effort, and then it distracts from your ability to focus on other cases.
It does. And near misses, we're dealing with hundreds of clients, thousands of documents. It's easy to have a problem occur if you're not very
Hmm.
careful. That's our worst
Hmm.
nightmare. That's my worst
Yeah.
nightmare as an attorney. Am I going to miss a deadline? Am I going to turn in a packet that's not accurate? Am I going to miss something and cause a problem for my clients? And for that reason, we try to set up systems that can prevent that from happening in the first place. And it could be as simple as, are we mailing this response to the right place? Because if you
Hmm.
mail it to the wrong place and you miss a deadline, that's pretty bad, right? So, and we have had their misses with that, but we've caught them because of, the systems we set up in place. So I talked about our audits before. Our audits, we look at the case and take a snapshot every month of what's going on with it. What do we need to do? Is something stalled? Is there a bottleneck? But also quality control. Having a couple levels of checks on the packages before they go out is important. And and we catch near misses when we're dealing with thousands of data points for one application sometimes, and you could make some mistakes. But if you have a quality control process in place, then the paralegals can catch each other's mistakes. The attorneys can catch those mistakes. We work together as a team. And every process at the firm that we have here has what we call an ROE, rules of engagement, and basically a standard operating procedure. And so we have to keep adapting those if something comes up and we see, oh, wow, this could be a problem. Let's figure out how we can deal with this. And so we try to follow those standard operating procedures to minimize these inefficiencies and possible mistakes and catch them before they happen. And that's been indispensable in having us be able to, present a quality product for each one of our clients.
So zooming into these standard operating procedures, firms all the time are discussing new initiatives to increase case flow efficiency. They're exploring what operating procedures they can put in place so that they can focus on more billable work, on more productive work, more drafting. Um, and I know that some of these ideas never get off the ground, and sometimes it's because the change is too big, or that it doesn't resonate with the team, or whatever else. Maybe it's too manual to ultimately scale, or doesn't deliver the expected value. But what's one efficiency initiative that you've seen that actually has worked?
Yeah, that's interesting question. And we have had a lot of things we've started that fizzled. And whether that's a leadership problem or it's just not the right fix, it's hard to say. But there's a program we had that we instituted that we had to really modify to make sure it still worked. And um, we we kind of took something from Sam Clemens, Mark Twain, and he has a story or a saying that he says, if you have to eat a frog, do it now. Do it first thing in the morning. If you have to eat that frog. And so I have a picture on my wall right now, eat that frog with a big frog on it. And we instituted that for our production team, the paralegals and attorneys. And we met together briefly in a stand up meeting and we all talked about our frogs for that day. And the idea was if we identified one or two of the most important things that we do every day and we reported on you know, the results the next day, that would make us more efficient, wouldn't it? It would kind of be a goal that we would get done every day.
It's
But
like 1% improvement every day.
that's right, get better every day. And that was the idea. But we had some problems with it. If things didn't go as planned, maybe there would have been um, something come up in the day. Well, they knew they had to get their frogs done, and some employees went back and kind of modified their frog to fit what they actually did in the day. And of course, that wasn't the way to do it. Uh, or sometimes they would try to set up a frog or a goal that was just too ambiguous or not specific enough. So we had to rehome this because it became kind of unhelpful, you know, and it wasn't really motivating and it wasn't really improving efficiency. So, we talked about smart goals, choosing the right frog to report on. And um, we had to kind of, lay out some ground rules for how to set up those frogs. And then we had to follow up with them, and there had to be real follow up. Somebody had to take notes at that meeting and actually, be able to hold everybody else accountable and themselves accountable. And so eating the frog, what we did was we put a list of things that this is what you have to do every day. If you're a paralegal, you've got to check your messages, you've got to check the court information, you've got to check CIS notifications. You've got to do this every day. That's not a frog. You're going to do that anyway every day. Have a checklist. And your frog is going to be something beyond that to move a client's matter forward towards progression, towards completion. And so after we kind of honed in and separated out daily tasks from bigger tasks and talked about setting how to craft a smart goal and how to choose a frog to take care of that day, it's been going so much better.
And what's like a standout example that you've seen that was like, wow, that's amazing. We all need to implement this.
Yeah, well, um, I think that we'll talk about cases, and sometimes they would just not proceed, and we would be uh, talking about it every day. And then there was this one memo that we were waiting for to attach with the case, because if there's a complex issue in an immigration case, we'll slide in a memo that kind of talks about the legal status of it. And that became the frog of one of the team members to do. And so, even though it was a tougher project, even though they were busy with other things, they came back the next day and said, I got my draft done of the memo, and it went on to quality control. So it totally has um, helped us identify what's super important
Hmm.
and get a plan to get that done in a timely fashion.
And I'm guessing examples like that, like with the memo, you can then reapply that across all of these different cases. And yeah, maybe it was 2, 3, 4 hours of work initially, but then it saves you, you know, all that time with every new case that you can then reapply it.
That's right. I mean, um, you see a novel issue and you spend some time on it, and then you have that template for future use. And it's easy to find
Hmm.
those if you have it, the document saved in your practice management, and it all comes together.
If your team could stop dealing with one case flow headache forever, something that drains time, energy, patience, what do you think that'd be?
Well, I mean, I talked about um, the stage in our cases of document collection, but and that's an issue. But I think another one would be transitioning clients through their process at my firm. We have some bottlenecks there. We have some troubles there. Uh, Clients don't like to be just passed off, and um, the process that we identified for our clients was they first somehow get into contact with our firm. And that's what we call the intake process. They've reached out to us in a text, in a message, in a phone call. And through the intake process, we qualify the client. Are they handling a case? Do they have a problem that we can help them with? Then we get them in for a consultation. And then that's another part of the process. I do the consultations at my firm right now, and I have another person that helps me with them too. But that's kind of a different stage. And so the client first calls the firm and talks to our intake team, and our intake team develops a good relationship with them, asks them a lot of questions, and gets some good information from them and qualifies them. So the client has a kind of a relationship with the intake team, but then they switch over to uh, the consultation, and that would be me usually. And then they have, you know, time with the attorney to talk about their case, and then we have to transition through becoming a client. They have to look at a fee agreement, understand it, sign it, and pay the initial fee. And that's another transition period. And then after that, they get onboarded and they go to the production team, and their case gets worked on. And I think that some of those headaches are really tough to overcome through a client that's transitioning through those processes. And qualifying the clients early on is important, because we don't want to get the client through the process if we really can't help them with their case. But immigration law is complicated. And how can you have somebody on an intake team that doesn't have a master's degree or a law degree, and I'll know all about immigration law? How are they going to be able to identify that? And having some logic based questions and having some um, information gathering and some training is important to try to weed that out. But it's kind of an issue that we're working on. How do we qualify those clients, and how do we make that transition more seamless so the client um, is still happy at the end of the process?
Yeah, it's I saw this at BAL, it is challenging when, they have built just amazing systems to be able to be as efficient as possible. But that means dividing and subdividing. Teams are divided by non-immigrant visa and immigrant visa. And so you might be a employee working at a, a top tech company, and you've got both your perm and your, I-129 renewal for an H-1B at within different groups across the firm. And having those groups talk to one another, have seamless handoff is challenging, and it's something that I think law firms across the industry are still solving, both big and small. How do you have a seamless system across all members of your team? So I've got one final question for you, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time today. It's been so lovely to connect and hear about your work and to catch up a little bit. My final question is a fun one. If you were to design an immigration case management system from scratch, no rules, no legacy systems, no red tape, what's the first feature you'd build and why?
Wow, yeah. I wish I had that power. Um, well, the a feature that I think would be great would be kind of addressing the problem I talked about in the other question.
Hmm.
The system needs to be client focused. We're
Hmm.
serving clients. We're not just doing legal work. It's not just a transaction. We're serving clients. We're achieving their goals. So I think um, having a really robust intake system that
Mm.
seamlessly would um, connect to your practice management system would be fantastic. And I know those might exist in different forms, but I have never found one that had all the features that were kind of important to me and important to my clients. So having a really good, strong intake piece of software that did all the things that we wanted to do, that would send texts, send videos, send links, follow up with them, um, have ways of classifying them in some type of pipeline so that we can follow up with them until they were um, all the way ready to become a client, and that just seamlessly integrated with that software that did all the things that we needed it to do. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's kind of a big dream, but that's kind of one of the things that's where I would start at least.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a great idea. So, Chris, thanks again. This was really great to connect. Thank you for sharing some of these insights. Um, the last thing, where can people reach you, and any final words that you've got to leave with the audience?
Yeah. Uh, Go to my website. It's keen.law, KEEN dot LAW. Give us a call at 801-374-5336, and just keep up the fight. That's all I have to say.
Awesome. This is great.